Also, I just want to announce that we have videotapes in the back, folks. Most of you have seen them. I also have these T-shirts dealing with the Morris Science Flower of Life. I'm selling those in the back. Basically, I don't make anything off of about $5. It cost me about $35 to put them together. Patches come from India, and the shirts are tie-dyed by hand. So right now I'm going to introduce Brother Sharif A. Bey, long awaited. He was here with Hakeem Bey about 4 weeks ago? About 4 weeks ago, and he dropped some heavy science, so I'm sure you're in for a treat. Sharif.
Good to be back out here again. Thanks to everyone. My wife made some really serious points about what's going on in the here and now, and I'm going to follow up on that. Again, to reiterate something that she had said earlier, is that a lot of us are used to, and we've fallen into the rut of being entertaining and being, getting feel-good speeches and the feel-good information, and we lull ourselves to sleep because it's a lot of these things sound very good, and they're good to know about our history, about our culture. That's good to know. Prophet Drew Ali said in one of his oral prophecies, he said that the Moors once ruled the world. Now get ready to rule it again, but this time under love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. He also said that I'm going to leave the European here just long enough to teach you how to run a government. Now we know the purpose of history. The purpose of true history is actually programming for yourself in the present. In other words, if you know what you were capable of doing in the past, that gives you a vantage point to do what you need to do in the present for the future. The problem with the artificial slave history that we've been given is that it programs you to be the perfect slaves. Because if all you knew that you were in the past was a slave, that's all you will ever endeavor to be. You'll always be looking for what the insurance people call limited liability. Well, I don't have to be responsible. I'm a second-class citizen. And that's what slavery is. Slavery is limited liability. I don't have to be responsible. Somebody else is taking care of my food, clothing, and shelter, and I'm not. All right? True history, or what we call Moorish history, we're fond of saying that, that the only true history of the past 2,000 years is that of the Moorish nation. But that's a heavy responsibility if you're told that, and we can prove that we financed the European side of this two-sealed government. We financed the European to set up here and establish corporate entities, which are now called states. They're still colonies. And we did it under our federal government or our federal banner. Then that's a heavy responsibility, because now we, at the same time as accepting that, we have to also accept the responsibility for cleaning up the mess that this country is in today. If we're indeed the federal government, we are now responsible for what's happening, and we have to be in positions to clean up the mess. We have to be. So what the sister said earlier is absolutely essential. We cannot be satisfied, and I'm talking to myself as well. We can't be satisfied by sitting here or standing here in front of people and doing speeches and lectures. It's good, but this is not where the work is supposed to be done. The work is done in our seats of government, and we have to take that responsibility. I want to give some thanks to a few people. One of them is Hakeem Bey. He couldn't be here. He was going to try to be here. But he's going to be making a few, or actually he's going to be delivering some statements, written statements around, but that's why I have that written, right, as far as his progress up in the Syracuse area, upstate New York. I also want to give thanks to a brother in Jersey, in Canada, New Jersey, by the name of Taj Tariq Bey. He puts out excellent literature under the name Moorish Order of the Round Table. Excellent literature. You can get your hands on any of this stuff, I suggest you do. Also thanks to a brother who recently made transition His name is Brother Johnson Bay out of Cleveland, Ohio. It's the man that nationalized myself and one of my other close friends. And he was with the Moorish Circle of Mothers and Sons of Cleveland, Ohio. He was a direct personal student under Charles Mosley Bay, also known as C.M. Bay. There's, I don't have the Bible here with me, but I'm going to start my lecture. The name of my lecture is Moorish Jurisprudence. Moorish Jurisprudence. The term jurisprudence is a legal term, and what it means, jurisprudence means the treatment of the science of positive law. Positive law as opposed to negative law. We'll get into that in a minute. But that's what jurisprudence is, the treatment of the science of positive law. Most law students, when they go to school, will tell you, they're not taught about jurisprudence. They don't even hear the word jurisprudence until the very end of the course, if they make it that far. And then it's mentioned. The science of law is why law works. And that principle is very simple. Very simple. It's very simple. A lot of the trappings around it make it complicated so they don't want, because they don't want the average person knowing. Because once you know, you're on par with other people that know. And they have to respect you and meet you on the level. They can't rule over you. What I'm going to do in the first half of this lecture is that I'm going to kind of rush people, kind of bring people up to, I don't know who knows what. So I'm going to bring people, up to speed with a couple of pertinent issues in terms of history. So we can bring things up to the present time so that it can, so that the actual science or technical aspects of what I'm going to be dealing with can make a little more sense. In the book of Revelations in the Bible, 12th chapter, 7th verse, it speaks of a war in heaven. I'm sure everybody knows, most people have heard or familiar with the story. Of Satan and his angels, a dragon and his angels fighting against Michael and his angels, and how they fought in heaven, and how the dragon was found, there was no more place found for him, he was cast out. Okay? Now what is the question, what does this have to do with law? What does that have to do with government, the science of government? The term heaven in the Bible has a number of coded connotations. One of them is government. Heaven is government. All right? When it talks about a war in heaven, it's talking about a war between two parties in one particular place. That war was between this seal and that seal. Question. What country on the planet do you know that has two seals? A seal is representative of a government. That's what a seal is representative of. A seal is representative of a government, and a government is representative of a nation. You had two seals on one landmass. That's what we're dealing with here. When did this particular war in heaven take place, and which seal lost? Who can tell me which seal lost the war? Well, a lot of that actually depends on when the war took place. The war took place between the years of 1928 and 1933. That's when this war took place. Which seal won? Who knows? $64,000 question. Which seal won? Which seal lost?
That seal won. Great seal won.
This seal won? This seal lost? Absolutely correct. This seal won in 1933. This seal lost in 1933. This is one that was cast out. And in Revelation spoke of, woe unto the people of the earth, for the devil has come down with great wrath because he knows his time is short. Now, can we translate that to events that happened around 1933? Yes, we can. What great, huge event in history on this landmass happened March 6, 1933?
Bankruptcy.
Exactly. The country officially, actually actually not the country. Be more specific. The several European states pledged the faith and credit thereof to our federal government. They went bankrupt. March 6, 1933. What happened exactly 3 days later, March 9, 1933? Does anyone know? 3 days later, March 9, 1933, under executive order, House Joint Resolution 192, and the Trading with the Enemy Act and the War Powers Act, the Union of States, not United States, the Union of States declared insolvency and martial law. The Constitution was officially suspended. Don't take my word for it, find out yourself. It was officially suspended. The U period, S period, as you knew or thought you knew it, ceased to exist on that day. It ceased to exist. Can we prove it? Go to your local libraries, pull up basic information on every state constitution. You will find that from the years 1935 to 1938, their constitutions will show revisions to reflect the bankruptcy. Question: in a bankruptcy, if you declare bankruptcy, can you sue another entity? Can you bring any legal action on another entity? Can you be sued? You can't. What does that say about the several states? When you commit a so-called victimless crime, and they say the city of New York versus, or the state of New York versus. Again, this still laws. That's still laws. It laws. That's the fallacy of the patriot movement. That's another thing I wanted to touch on. That's the fallacy of the patriot movement. We know that sovereignty is based on what? Don't answer. Sovereignty is based on what? Sovereignty, state of being sovereign is a perk, and it is based on one major thing, and that is nationality. Ironically, citizenship is also based on nationality. It is based on nationality. Very important point. Nationality means your natal identity. What part of the earth you are native to. Question: is the European native to this land matters? How in the world can he be a sovereign? It's a fact. But we got a lot of us running around here with fences saying we're sovereign and saying we're patriots. Saying there's such thing as state sovereignty. And we wonder why this European looks at us and scratches his head and goes, they still haven't got it. We wonder. We wonder. We run out there and we try things, we get smacked up, they lock us in jail, they beat us up, and make examples out of it and put you in the newspaper about it, too. So they scare all the other Negroes. We're working against ourselves. Actually, we're working for them. Out here experimenting. We have to understand the basic science of law and where we fit in the matrix. Where we fit in. March 9, 1933, the several states became legal fictions. They were just paper creations to begin with. Who knows anything about corporate law? A corporation is an artificial entity created on what? Paper. It's an artificial entity created on paper. That's all it is. The states are colonies. The colonies started from 6 corporations. They still are. You come into the city limits of New York City, what does it say? City of New York, corporate limits. Question: can a corporation own land? Answer. Anyway. No. A corporation cannot own land. So what are they saying when the cop stops you or whatever and he says, What are you talking about? You're not subject to this law, that law, the other. You're a law. What the hell is that? You're in New York City. What is he telling you? What is he saying? Or what is he assuming? If New York City Incorporated cannot own land, it has nothing to do with the land, what is he saying you're a part of? He's saying that you are either a part of the corporate body or a subject of the corporate body. Because that's what a corporation is. A corporation is a body of trustees that manage corporate assets. Am I right? That's what it is. So now let's go back to the whole thing when you get hit with a lawsuit and you get hit with a summons to court and it says the city of New York versus. Well, wait a minute. If you're a citizen of the city of New York, as a lot of us are led to believe, how can you bring suit against yourself? Either you are one of the corporate board members, which are the real citizens of the corporate body of the city of New York Incorporated, or you are part of the corporate assets that are managed. You are managed. All right? That's it. We went over the whole issue about there being two seals. What people does this nation represent? So this government represents what nation? This seal. Anybody? Maybe. Anybody? People, we'll just keep it simple. The dark-skinned, kinky-haired aboriginals of this landmass that we call North, Central, and South America. That's what this seal represents. Believe it or not, this seal represents who? So-called white men. We call them white. Again, Morris jurisprudence is the science of positive law. If I say in a hip-hop atmosphere, I'm amongst people my age or younger and with, the whole, and I say, oh, that was fact. That's a positive thing. That means, oh, that was good. A crowd and maybe an overweight woman there, and I say, oh, that's fact. That's a bad thing, isn't it? They give me smack. Right? So you have different language for different settings. The language of finance is what? French. The language of mathematics and science is what? Arabic. The language of law is what? Latin. Fact of the matter is that I can say certain things in the everyday world and they mean one thing. I can say something else in the courtroom and mean something entirely different. So when we say white, what are we saying? Let's find out what we're saying when we say white people according to the law. Black Law Dictionary, 3rd edition. This is also in the 4th edition.
What dictionary is that?
Black's Legal Law Dictionary. The definition that I'm reading to you is taken out of the recent editions. It's only in the 4th edition and earlier. So if you get a 5th or 6th edition, you won't find this. But it's here, and I'll have it for everyone to look at on the break. The legal definition of the term free white persons. Listen closely. Free white persons, referred to in the Naturalization Act as amended by Act 1870, has meaning naturally given to it when first used. It includes the Magyars, Lapps, Finns, Basques, and Albanians. It includes the mixed Latin, Celtic, Iberian, and Moorish inhabitants of Spain and Portugal. It does not mean Caucasian race, Aryan race, or Indo-European races. So when you say white person, in a legal sense, you are calling someone God. Webster's dictionary definition of white, we all know it. pure, unblemished, honest, square dealing, fair. Definition of black: evil, sullen, foreboding, dirty. Are we describing the way people look? Are we describing the content of their character? How many of you have ever seen a white man? He's not white. Only children identify people by colors. We've been sorely miseducated. Only children. Now, some people will disagree. I've had people tell me, no, black means this, that, and the other. All right, tell it to the judge. Tell it to the judge. Call yourself a black man in court, and where will you find yourself? The judge understands that black is not a natal identity and that you are not honoring your mother when you call yourself black. You're not honoring your mother and your father. He knows that you're still... How many people know what a 730 evaluation is? A 730 evaluation. Anybody that's ever done time or been behind bars knows what a 730 is. It's a psychological evaluation done to minors and criminals. Do you know that when the clerks, when they sit you in front of the judge and the clerk says, are you so-and-so and so-and-so? And you say, yeah. And he says, or they say, do you live in such place? And you say, yeah. They have just conducted a 730 evaluation on you. If you have a lawyer friend, they may tell you that. They just conducted a 730 evaluation. At that point, they understand this person is not a free individual. They are a minor. They are a ward of the court, and a ward is someone who is, according to legal definition, a person of unsound mind. They don't understand. This person just told me that their address was such and such and such, was 630 West 139th Street. They don't understand. This person is telling me that they're a corporation, a paper fiction, because only corporations have addresses. Where do you live? Well, I live at 630 139th Street. Oh, yeah? So when you step off at 630 139th Street, are you dead? They know this. They know this. So when you answer yes to that, they say, okay, we're going to hit you with everything in the book. We will make up statutes to hit you with, which they do. And you will not be able to leave here without hiring one of our people from the Barristers Association of England with a branch in the United States to work on your behalf. How many of you are familiar with the Lawyers' Code of Ethics? Do you know that in the Lawyers' Code of Ethics written down, I don't care how much dough you pay the lawyer, his first obligation is to the court. Secondly, to the judge. Thirdly, to his opposing attorney. And lastly, to his client. Why is that? Of course it is. The Bar Association is a fraternity. It's a fraternity. But they want to steer you from the issues of proper natal identity and nationality. They want to steer you from these issues. Actually, I got a little ahead of myself. I want to go into a couple things. Number one, you might be interested in seeing, these flags here. What flag is this? What's the name of this flag? Everybody's correct. If anyone says that's the United States flag, that's incorrect. This is not the United States flag. The legal definition for United States does not mean the several states. Any lawyer will tell you that. United States means united sovereigns. And a sovereign is a landowner by birthright inheritance, not by conquering or conquest, as the Patriots say. Because the only way they can claim sovereignty through conquest is if you do not exist. And they did a good job on that because all they had to do is change your name. And you accepted it. And wrote yourself out of history. The reason why there's no such thing as Negro history is because there's no such thing as a Negro. The prophet said this. Noble Drew Ali said, can a man be black, white, Jew, or Negro? No. Really, what is he asking? Can a man be a man and a monkey at the same time? That's what he was asking. All right? So United States means United Sovereigns. This is not the United States flag because it has nothing to do with the land. This is a trading banner of 6 European nations, corporate entities. It's a trading banner. It has nothing to do with the land. Nothing at all. You want to see the real United States flag? That's the real United States flag. Do the research yourself. It's called the treaty flag, or it's called the flag of the Confederation. It's also called the Continental United States flag. This is called the Precept by doctors of law and moral scientists. The Precept. What does Precept mean? Anyone know? Precept is that which is written down. Okay? The precept follows the concept. The concept is the idea. What's the concept? That's the concept. The Moorish national flag. The real name of it is Old Glory. When was this flag taken down on this continent? What year? Anyone know? Wow. Does anyone know that this flag flew on this continent? This flag was taken down by George Washington, 1774. 1774, this flag was taken down. All right? How many of you are familiar with the story of George Washington and chopping down the cherry tree? Do you think that was just a cool fairy tale they made up for no particular reason or for entertainment? No. How old was he in the story written by Parson Weems? How old was he? Anybody know?
9 years old.
9 years old. He was 9 years old when he said, "I cannot tell a lie, chop down the cherry tree." What's the significance of all that? Don't answer this. Don't answer this. If George Washington, was George Washington the first president of the United States?
No.
Okay, everybody knows. Now you know the significance of the number 9, why he was 9 years old. What president was he? He was the 9th president. He was the 9th president. He was not the first. That's a very simple one in terms of education, like the sister brought up. We say that numbers don't lie. Mathematics is the universal science. But we don't apply it, not even in its basic sense. They teach us the metric system in school, and then they straight lie to us about the months in the calendar. They teach us numbers. 1 comes before 2, and then 3, and then 4, then 5. And they tell us they teach us addition and subtraction. Then they tell us George Washington was the first president. But they play themselves because they tell you the year he was inaugurated, 1789. But the states declared independence in 1776. Who was president at that time? But none of us question our educators about it. We don't question them. Another big issue that kicks us in the behind is our people that literally disenfranchises us voluntarily is the acceptance of this type of BS. We accept it. It's voluntary slavery. The 13th Amendment said involuntary servitude will not exist upon pain of death. All right. Didn't say nothing about the contracting of labor or voluntary slavery, did it? Case in point, if I lie to you, you may not know me, but if I lie to you and you find out I've lied, everything I say from that point on is suspect, isn't it? Now, we're fond of saying that this European man has said this, that, and the other, and he lied about this, said we're running around after bones on our nose, and he made better people out of us by enslaving us. That's a lie. We're fond of saying that, aren't we? But this same man tells you that he picked you up on a slave ship and brought you over here in the 1500s and 1600s by the millions, and you believed it. And we still believe it. And many of us make millions of dollars perpetrating a bold-faced, shallow lie. Question. When did the Black Plague hit Europe? 14th century. Right? 14th century. Excuse me? The Black Plague. The 14th to the 16th century, the Black Plague ravaged Europe, destroyed nearly a third of its population. Why was the Black Plague able to do this? Basically, no disrespect. People didn't know how to cook and preserve food properly. Poor sanitation. People weren't washing. How long does it take for an average trip across the Atlantic, even in the present day? I won't even go into that. How long would it take a regular ship with sails to make the trip? The average was 3 months. Now, how did they survive? To hell with the slaves, just to think about the crew. How did they survive when they couldn't even preserve their own food on land? There's records of shipbuilding companies and schools that teach navigation. What are the names of those in England during that time? There should be records of it. How is it that you've never seen a slave ship in your life? I'm not talking about the Henrietta that sunk off the coast of Florida. They call it a slave ship. They call the Amistad a slave. They call the Amistad a slave ship. It was a warship. Come on. Play the language game. In my book, I talk about Toussaint Louverture, San Domingo Revolution, Haiti. They say he was a runaway slave. Strange, though, that every time they see a picture of him, he has an admiral's uniform on. Well, since when did slaves wear admiral's uniforms? It said that this man repelled the greatest European navy in the history of that time, Napoleon. Ooh, wait a minute. Doesn't it take a navy to repel a navy? But they tell you he's a runaway slave and believe it. Instead of facing the obvious fact that the man was a military strategist with an army and a navy, right, possible. There's a book that my wife put me on to called The Black Jacobins. Incredible book. Little paperback. Incredible book. She made the statement, the quote by my brother C.M. Bay. C.M. Bay in his excellent literature, Clock of Destiny 1 and 2, he says, the history of the Moorish nation lies hidden in every library of the Union. The key word says it lies hidden. Us, we have feathers on, turbans, and the whole nine, but we're still Negroes because we'll run to the library thinking we're going to see a book that says Moorish history, illustrated. Right? With pictures, big pictures, you know? Come on. It's hidden. How many people would think to look for Moorish history in the works of Shakespeare? That's where it is. How about, what's the name of the book? French. Candide. Candide by Voltaire. Get it. Get it. Touch it. Oh. But Candide by Voltaire. Classical literature. Why? You were the ones writing it. You were the ones writing it. But you were being persecuted for it at the time because we were seeing a change in the hands of power. So you couldn't put it out there plainly. You had to do it, as we say, masonically. Half concealed, half revealed. So you put it in literature. I'm sure all of us here know that Shakespeare didn't write all that himself. Shakespeare was a pen name for 36 men under the leadership of one particular man. Who knows who that guy was? Sir Francis Bacon. That's exactly who he was. How many people know what he looked like? Or know his parental background? His mother was who? His mother was the Queen of England. He was the quote-unquote illegitimate son of her and a dark-skinned Moor by the name of the Duke of Lancaster. The Duke of Lancaster. He was a mulatto, as we put it. What was his name? Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon. For those of you that are familiar with the Rosicrucian Order, the man or the mythical founder of the Rosicrucian Order was a man named, they gave him a pen named Christian Rosicruce, or Father R.C. That was Francis Bacon. That was him. Father R.C. was Francis Bacon. He traveled to Fez, Morocco to learn mysticism under a Sufi order called Order of the Rose. Getting back to my topics. History. I mentioned that we have two separate but equal nations on this one landmass. Can I prove it legally? Again, we're talking jurisprudence and science of positive law. Yes, I can. There's a case that you need to research the decision on. The case is called Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson affirms two separate but equal nations on one landmass. Or, like it is on the back of your dollar bill, two governments well involved in one. Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson affirms that. Two separate but equal nations. What further affirms it is the Dred Scott case. Everybody's heard the Scott versus Sanford case. Right? That further affirms it. Do not believe the people, white supremacists. Now, what I mean by white supremacists is that that's a political ideology. Many of us here in this room are white supremacists. Just keeping it real. Many of us in this room may be white supremacists. Many of you that walk around here, you call yourself black? No disrespect, you're a white supremacist. Just keep it real. Call yourself black, white, Negro, Indian, West Indian, any of these slave labels. That is a white supremacist mentality. Why? Because in 1854, these Europeans got together and said, you know what, we have our beefs and differences, but look, man, we all have one common goal. We are outnumbered on the planet 11 to 1. And we can't hold these aboriginals here down physically for much longer. We have to have an educational revolution. So we all got to get together. So these minorities got together and they said, okay, we are no longer German, French, Dutch, English, Irish. We're white. They took your name. We read the definition. They took your name. They traded places. And then instead of saying this is the Moorish nation we subjugated, we rewriting history, reconstruction. And what do we call them? Black, you're Trini, you're Jamaican, you're an Indian. We were already doing it. They already had their men running in and out of our women to further broaden the human bouquet spectrum. So somebody like her, or they let her run into the interior and live in teepees on the run. And they retell the stories of their Indians. Somebody like you, they take you to the eastern seaboard and put you on the auction block. There's a book out everybody can get by Jack Forbes called Africans and Native Americans. Get the book. The Africans and Native Americans. It's in any and every major bookstore. Jack D. Forbes. Get the book. Yeah, he still has the Christian paradigm of the slave trade across the Atlantic, but he gives some real interesting things in there. Like for the fact that there's actual records in Europe or in Spain of Native Americans being stolen and sold on the auction blocks in Spain with names like Ali and Muhammad, Native Americans. Guess what they were classified when they got to Spain? Say it again? Negroes. Oh, so just the opposite's going on. The Dred Scott versus, I kind of got over. The Dred Scott versus Sanford case, a lot of people will tell you, oh, that was overturned, the 14th Amendment. How many people have heard that? You can't use the Dred Scott case was overturned. How many people have heard that? How many people believe that you can't use the Dred Scott case, that it was actually overturned? Is everybody familiar with the decision of the Dred Scott decision? No, sir. Dred Scott decision, Judge Roger Tawney said this: Dred Scott has no power. We have to toss the case. The lack of jurisdiction. Because Dred Scott in his own deposition said he was a Negro descendant of African slaves and has no power in this court, slave or free. He can never be a citizen of our several state society with the power to sue in federal court. Never. So we can't hear his case. That's why they call him plaintiff in error. How many people here think that they can't use that in the present day? You don't think so? That's honest. That's big. Big. He's with me. He traveled here with me. Now, I'm going to show you why, with basic history that we learned in grade school, why that's a lie. We learned in grade school about the three powers of government, didn't we? Three powers of government, or the three houses of government. Legislative, executive, judicial. Right? Executive does what? Enforces the law. Legislative does what? Makes the law. Judicial does what? Interprets the law. It's three-tiered so that each one is a check and balance for the other, so that no one of them can decide on their own issues. Understand? You see what I'm getting at now? How in the world can legislation, as in the 14th Amendment, overturn a decision coming from the Supreme Court? It can't. There's no legislation that can overturn a Supreme Court decision. What is the only thing that can overturn a Supreme Court decision? Another Supreme Court decision. Has there been another Supreme Court decision to supersede the decision made in Dred Scott versus Sandford? No. And I defy anybody to show me. There hasn't been. The 14th Amendment conferred no real citizenship. Sorry to say, a lot of your black leaders have been misleading you. It confers no real citizenship. Research the slaughterhouse cases, 1866. You'll find out. The decision was like, there is no quote-unquote 14th Amendment citizenship that gives you first-class citizenship status. No such thing. No such thing. So the Dred Scott versus Sandford case stands. But it's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if we desire to be like Europeans and we desire to live under this sea as opposed to our own. We want to keep being the prodigal son. They have no problem sitting in this seat in your place. They don't got no problem with it. They'll do it for another 50 years. They have no problem. The last case I'm going to deal with, it seems like it may be unrelated, but it's very pertinent, is the case Roe versus Wade. Who's familiar with Roe versus Wade? What was Roe versus Wade about? It was the famous abortion case where you had people saying that, well, abortion
Is maybe the Far East. Dang. That's what I heard.
Breaker for most people, this whole issue has never been about race. Race. What happened to this man at law? Erase out of your mind the racism garbage. That's what it is. Erase out of your mind and just think jurisprudence, the science of positive law. Think that for a second. All right? Firstly, a last name is your surname or national parentage name. Who's Johnny Gamage? Not an Asiatic. Johnny Gamage is an Englishman. That's number one. Number two, what happened to the cops? What were they tried under? Remember, everybody was like the cops, the people who advocated, on the side of the cops were saying, oh, it's double jeopardy. They're trying them again for the same thing. But under what? Civil rights violations, right? Question, is there such thing as civil rights laws? Who said no? Anybody agree? Anybody disagrees? Right after the Civil War, the Civil Rights Bill of I believe it was 1866. Slaughterhouse case was in 1883. I believe it was 1866. Civil Rights Bill was passed under a lot of controversy. Afterwards, you had all kinds of riots and all kinds of other things. And then you had the slaughterhouse cases, which determined two things. Number one, that the 14th Amendment conferred no real citizenship. And number two, guess what? The Civil Rights Bill was unconstitutional. It was repealed. Now the real question, the real why, is why does the president have to sign it every 25 years? It's a bill. It was never law. So what happened to those police officers when they said, oh, we're going to try you again under civil rights and convict you? They did that for all of us dumb Negroes out here. We would feel like, oh, justice served. They got convicted. Civil rights violations. What did their lawyers do? Went right back in the court the next day on appeal and said, how can you convict on a non-existing law? They were expunged and they never did a day in jail. Never. See the game they play on us? Because we're thinking colors. We're thinking that that's a black man and the other person's a white man. When children identify the nations of the earth by color, we got names like, no disrespect, Johnny Gamage. What is that according to law? That's contracting business under a false name. You can go to jail for that. That's what it is. Gamage is an Englishman. Or a Scotsman. He's not an Asiatic, he's a Scotsman. Therefore, no rights to be respected. He doesn't honor his mother and father with his national parentage name. That means he's the property of the person who owns that national parentage name. That's what it means, according to law. So he is subject to, not part and parcel to. He's subject. All right? So, that's what happened to him. That's what happened to the cops in L.A. with the Rodney King incident. That's what happened to O.J. Simpson. Do you know why what happened to O.J. Simpson happened to O.J. Simpson? Had nothing to do with the murder of his ex-wife. It had to do with, as Brother Taj Tariq put it, the Black Code 1724, which is what all your state legislation is based on. The Black Code 1724. Look them up. They just won't call them that. They call them vagrancy laws. It's the same thing. Do you know what one of those is? The one that they applied to O.J. Simpson's issue? It is forbidden for any European woman to marry a Negro. And they are not obligated to recognize the marriage. And that person can be subjected to any arbitrary punishment. Basically, we'll make something up for him. So that's what happened to O.J. But they can't tell you that because you have to have faith in civil rights. Because that's the plug on the bottle for the genie. You the genie or the genius. That's the cork in the bottle. One of them. Because once you get away from the whole race issue and civil rights issue, now we're thinking real issues. It's never been color. It's not about, oh, we just don't like you niggas. It's always been about the true parental ownership of the land. Always. Oh, they love it every 26th of February when we say Black History Month. And we praise the myth of coming across the Atlantic. What did it say, 50 million? I've heard ridiculous numbers, 200 million of us. Read an atlas and look at the west coast of Africa and tally the approximate population. Don't you realize that 20 to 50 million people across the Atlantic would have depopulated Western Africa? It never happened. How many people are familiar with the Olmecs, Toltecs in Mexico? What do they look like? Dark-skinned, kinky-haired people, am I correct? Now, we can prove that at least a small group of dark-skinned, kinky-haired people were pre-Columbian. They were here before Columbus and before the so-called slave trade from Africa. Can anyone here in this room prove that their ancestors came from that land? just knowing about the Olmecs destroys the myth of the transatlantic slave trade. We were always here. As long as you're thinking race and it's just white and black and they don't like us niggas, you will always keep doing the same things and expecting different results. That's the clinical definition of insanity. Yes, him and me. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to ask you this. How did I prevent this from getting here? That's it.
Brother, I'll tell you. How did you, within the course of 400 years, I'll answer your question. How did you, within the course of 400 years, lose your identity? Black is an adjective. Black describes a noun, and a noun is an object, person, place, thing, or idea. Black what? They can go in the ground and dig up bones and tell you what the animals ate millions of years ago. But in the course of 400 years, all of a sudden they don't know who you are. So the big joke every 25 years is what the niggas gonna call themselves today. Do you know how they changed you from a national identity to property status, walking on two legs? Like the sister said, education. They rewrote history and got you to accept it. Now, once they did that, they can tell you anything. We got you from the moon. And you will have no choice but to believe it because you don't know where you came from. Fact. You don't know where. They say, we got you from Mars, nigga. And you'll be like, Black Power, I'm proud to be from Mars. And they lie every year with a joke. I have to give credit to Minister Louis Farrakhan for the Me and Mad March, because in one day, he helped to change hundreds of years of negative information, disinformation about you here. Just because a lot of us, blind, deaf, and dumb Negroes, got together in one place with relative peace. I give it up to him. He changed public policy on the Negro in one day. Or he helped.
In fact, in Houston, Texas, too.
That's right. But the fact of the matter is that none of our people wanted to touch us. They didn't want to touch us. We were stinking. As some people say, in the shallow grave. We were stinking. Still are. Still are. You know what I'm saying? That's why, okay? We came, without confusing people, I'll just say it, might as well say it. Brother, you never left ancient Africa. You never left ancient Africa. And I'll prove it. You never left it. You're always here. The only thing that happened is that you came from Africa to America by the stroke of a pen. They changed the name. How many of you are familiar with one of the oldest maps of the Western Hemisphere called the Peri Raised Map? It's written in Latin, it's also written in Arabic, by a quote-unquote Arab cartographer by the name of Peri Raised.
Name again?
Peri Raised, P-I-R-I-R-E-I-S. In Arabic, or in your Aramaic languages, we don't write the vowels, am I correct? Studies Hebrew. Why? I won't go into why in detail. Bottom line is that the vowel contains the life of the word. And words are things, and words bring things into physical manifestation. So the vowels are considered sacred. Okay? In Latin, he called what we now call America Mex. It's on the map. In Arabic, he called it MRC. Let's look at that for a second. In your Latin-based languages, you have masculine tense and feminine tense, right? We can say puerto, we can say puerta in Spanish, correct? masculine, feminine. We can express this word in masculine or feminine tense, and it's been done. It'll look crazy to us here because we're here. Talk to somebody who speaks Arabic or Latin, it makes perfect sense. Masculine tense. Feminine tense. Just switched up name. That's it. Morocco is America. Question, like I asked before. This flag here, when was it taken down on this landmass? First of all, most people, like I said before, are not aware that this flag flew on this landmass. When was it taken down? 1774. When did it go back up on this landmass? When did it go back up?
1933.
Exactly 20 years earlier. 1913 was when this flag was flown again in the Americas. This is historical fact. Why is that significant? I'll tell you why. In what we now call the state of Morocco, over there on the continent we now call Africa, when did this flag first fly? 1956, when they won their independence from the French. Where did it fly first in the modern world? A flag is representative of a nation. So now, based on the history I just gave you, where is the real Morocco?
Right here.
Can I give you more proof? Everybody's heard of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between the European nations and the Sultan of Morocco. If the state of Morocco over there didn't exist until legally 1956, who signed the treaty in 1787? But where was it signed? Two books. Get a book called, Hakeem has spoken about this book, The Diplomatic Relations Between the United States and the Barbary Powers, 1776 to 1816. Written by a man named Ray Irwin. Get the book. That book will tell you some things that you didn't see or you didn't hear in history class.
Could you repeat the name?
Diplomatic Relations Between the United States and the Barbary Powers. The author of the book is Professor Ray Irwin. I'm going to read you something else. My last lecture, I read this letter. The letter I'm reading is a letter dated December 1st, 1787. 1787. Written to the Sultan of Morocco by, guess who? George Washington. Great and magnanimous friend. Since the date of the letter, which the late Congress, by their president, addressed to your Imperial Majesty, the United States of America has thought proper to change their government and institute a new one agreeable to the Constitution, of which I have the honor of herewith enclosing a copy. The time necessarily employed in the arduous task and the derangement occasioned by so great though peaceable a revolution will apologize and account for your Majesty's not having received those regular advices and marks of attention from the United States. What was he talking about? They were paying tribute money just to be able to sail up and down the eastern seaboard. Get the book. It'll tell you. During this whole time, supposedly they tell you that they were fighting this revolution against European British redcoats. All of the European nations were enslaved and paying tribute to the Bey of Algiers, Tripoli, Morocco, Bay, Tripoli, Algiers, Morocco, and Tunis. Fact. That's the real history. Why is it that the Revolutionary War was basically only fought on land? Yes, sir.
Do you ever think about making about 1 million of those copies and passing them out at the White House?
Brother, this is the age of Aquarius, which is the age of I know. Now, this law ain't no secret, but everybody needs one. I'm not saying we keep this secret. And this is the age of Aquarius, which is the age of I know, but you have to be intelligent in how you pass it. A marksman says 1 bullet, 1 body. You don't spray because you hit all the wrong people. You understand? 1 bullet, 1 body. So you put it out in the proper way. Spreading out over the White House, all they're going to do is say, well, this person doesn't know what they're doing, and they have no idea what they have. They don't know how to use the tool. They just got a whole bunch of tools in a bag carrying it around. You have to know how to use the tool. The fact of the matter is that you have to understand, or how we use it, how we use the tool, this particular one, is knowing who are the parties involved. Who are the parties involved? Part of the title of my lecture was Operative Masonry, not speculative. We've been speculating for 400 some odd years. Right? Now we have to be Master Masons and Eastern Stars. We got to be that. Okay? And a master don't necessarily have to ask the questions. He should know. Yes, sir.
There's another question before I forget.
Yes, sir.
If a police officer came and approached me and asked me where do I live, and I told him in my body, what's to stop him from pulling the Rodney King on?
Absolutely nothing. Think about it, brother. The definition of a colonist is what? A thief. Now, I've used this analogy enough a lot of times. If I'm used to running you for your train fare every day without questioning, you don't fight me. You give it up, even to the point where I don't even have to ask. I just look at you the right way and you give up your train fare for years and years and years on end. Then all of a sudden, one day you want to get some heart and say, no, you just can't take my money like that no more. What am I going to do? I'm going to go, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was one time, in fact, here's all the money I took from you years before. That's not going to happen. It's a fight. I'm going to swell up for you. Like, you have money for you. You got to fight, man. They're not going to give it up like that easy. It's not going to happen. Of course, yeah, you say this, that, and the other to a police officer. It's going to be a problem. You know, we know that. But again, the whole issue is education. I'm going to tell you something that happened up in Syracuse, New York. There was a group, there's an organization that's basically funded by this European Jewish woman who writes grants. They basically take advantage of the violence in the youth in the urban areas by giving them BS programming and then writing glowing reports to the federal government saying it's working so they can keep getting the grants. That goes on all over the country, by the way. Right? It's in their best interest that the violence continues because that's how they keep getting the money. Alright? They tried to hire one of my former partners, and he was like, yeah, because he knew his special job. He was native to the Syracuse area. He knew all the youth organizations and everything. He had the ends. So they needed him. He said, all right, you got me. But guess what? I'm not signing a W-4. And I'm filling out the I-9 form for immigration and nationalization my way. Because I don't contract with these people without reserving my rights. It went all the way up to the top brass. The lady said, well, we're just going to have to fire you because they tell us that you got to fill it out this way or we lose our grant. We'd rather you sue us than we lose the grant. So see ya. They fired her. 2 months later, they asked me for the job. Figured, well, I'm a nicer guy. I'm a Sagittarius born on a Friday, so I got the Venus influence. I'm kind of nice. So they say, yeah, we'll get him. So they sweet talk me into the interview, and I'm like, oh, they're trying to play me over. They trying to play me for a candy bar. Price of a candy bar over my man. Nah, went through the whole interview, but they held up the interview because part of the board is the senior district attorney, a police officer, and a member of the probation department. And everybody else is Negroes, no disrespect. It was Negroes. Other 3 cats are European. And they're saying, hey, what's up with these Moors? They're crazy. I mean, they got ends of the community up here, but they're wild. They won't do this. They don't got driver's licenses. They don't got this, that, and the other. And guess what the European cop told him? He stood up. They said, what do you think? He said, I know plenty people that travel in their vehicles without licenses, legally. Well, after the Negroes picked the jaws up off the ground, they said, well, what do you do when you stop them? He said, I let them go. Now, we know that the police department knows about this. We know. We put them on notice. And they did the research and said, yeah, we can't mess with them, which is why they didn't mess with us. But that European did not have to tell those blind, deaf, and dumb Negroes that. You see what I'm saying? It's education. Just like Horace Greeley did to us in 1854. Educational revolution. We ain't gonna do it with this. We're gonna do it with this. And that's what they did. It was Horace Greeley that suggested the name white instead of calling us ourselves by the tribe of axe and spear. They were barbarians.
Just to go west, young man, or something like that?
Manifest Destiny was a part of that. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. They were the tribe of axe and spear. Did you know that? That's where the term Anglo-Saxon comes from. Anglo or Anglii comes from is Latin for spear, chunker, and Saxon is Latin for axe. They were two warring factions and split up into different sub-tribes that were warring against each other for years. And then they finally got together and said, look, we can't have this. We got a common enemy. We're going to call ourselves white collectively. And that's what they did. It has never been law that you were black and they were white. That's always been European custom. It's never been law. Research Plessy versus Ferguson. It'll tell you that. It ain't law, it's custom. But they got us following and chasing after. When the nations of the earth, come on, we're contracting, we're calling ourselves black and everything artificial. And then have the nerve to ask people with real nationalities for human rights and respect. But that's crazy. Give me an example of how crazy it is. That's like I have a plastic plant sitting here, and you see me and everybody sees it's plastic, and I'm giving it water and plant. You're gonna be like, what the hell is wrong with you? You guys, if you can, you would come and stop me from doing it. What are you doing? Isn't that what the foreigners do to us here? Am I correct? Isn't that how we're treated? They look at us like, we're told you like your condition. And they are told that. Don't tell them about nationality. How is it that every person on the planet has a nationality but you? And how is it that you're actually taught to separate yourself from the idea of nationality? But ironically, nationality is the prerequisite to citizenship. You see the games being played? Where you from, sir? People, okay. There's, what was the difference between the Johnny Gamage case and the Amadou Diallo case? What was the difference? When the police, question, why is it that they're trying so hard to get the feds to jump on the Johnny Gamage case and they won't touch it, regardless of what you hear? And with the Amadou Diallo case, they immediately were on it. Why? Why is it that the police got on TV publicly and said we made a grave mistake? Did they make a mistake in filling them full of holes? Do you know what the mistake was? The mistake was that they mistook him for an American Negro with no nationality. That's the mistake they made. Because with a nationality, that means what? You have a flag, a constitution, a government that is sworn to protect you. He had a nationality. They were like, oh my God. We thought he was a savage nigga. And the feds immediately jumped on it. Because he had rights. He honored his mother and father. Sorry to say. And this is really, it's an indictment on us. But what's about to happen in a few short days? Say it. Say it loud. Yeah, Mumia Abu Jamal is going to die. He's going to die. That's an indictment on us that say we know about nationality and rights and sovereignty and all these cool things. That man's going to die. It's education. That European has to get educated too. He had to subject himself to the same false history before he could subject the rest of the world to it.
So why don't the brothers that know these things go and say it?
Good question. I know of a couple brothers that have actually mailed the brother material. But a lot of the brothers, it's too little too late. It's a daily and a dollar short. Basically, they're going to kill this man just on principle. On principle. Just to say, y'all are niggas, yo. You gonna stay niggas. And we don't give a damn about you. You see what I'm saying? But it's nothing to get emotional about, which is what we do. Oh, we killed my brother. When in fact, the whole time this man was locked down, we were cheerleaders. Cheerleaders. And a lot of us were slick enough to make a lot of money off of it. Going back to the whole civil rights thing. If the civil rights bill is not law, and most of your so-called civil rights leaders are lawyers, why have they not told you that it is not law? Another question. If it is in fact true that you never were brought over here en masse on a transatlantic slave trade issue, and that our brothers in said Africa and other places know this, but they teach African studies in all your major universities. I'm in trouble for saying this. What does that say about these people? What are they doing? That's a big question. We're going to take I'll take the question. Go ahead.
Did not the officers in the Rodney King case was tried a second time with civil rights violations?
Again, it's all smokescreen, brother. That has other people in arms saying, oh, there's double jeopardy. You can't try them twice for the same thing. But it was the biggest back door. They were tried for civil rights violations. There's no such law in the books. The Civil Rights Bill is not law. They have to sign it every 25 years. It's not law. So all the lawyer has to do, a dime store legal, a dime store cat can walk in the court and say, and file a motion to dismiss based on what? It's not law. It's not. Yeah, well, they were convicted of civil rights violations, but that's like me going into a courtroom and the judge says, how do you plead? And I say, man, it can't be yes and no at the same time. I don't plead. Plea is a self-incriminatory statement. I make a move to dismiss. This court cannot hear redress of my grievance. Improper venue. Lack of jurisdiction. And he ignores it, contrary to Supreme Court case Higgins versus Levine. Proceeds, and I stand you. And they go all the way down the line and convict me. And I turn around the very next day and appeal and say, well, Higgins versus Levine says that once jurisdiction is challenged, it must be proven on the record. And U.S. versus Throckmorton, Supreme Court decision says that no sanction is lawful absent proof of jurisdiction. You gotta dismiss on appeal. That's what they did. So it doesn't matter. On paper, yeah, they'll put in the paper, Sharif, they got convicted of blah, 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 but I'm walking the streets the next day on appeal. And that's what happened. It was a smokescreen. Our people said, we got justice. You got convicted. And they never did a day in jail. Because they can't tell you that it was never about race and prejudice. It was always law. They're always working with law. Do you know why? This is the legal reason why Rodney King, Johnny Gamage's family, OJ can never bring a constitutional issue up against these Europeans. Because, and I'm going to deal with this in the second half of the lecture, but this is going to tie into it. All law is contract. All of it. Constitutions are contracts between two parties or more. The reason why these Negroes could not use this Constitution against these Europeans is because they're not a party to the contract. How the hell are you going to use the document against somebody who's a party to it and you're not even a party to it? But they can't tell you that. Because if they tell you that, you have riots and we'll realize, oh my God, they were right about Dred Scott. We never were members of their European Union Society of the Several States. It's like what happened in the Depression. They say, well, what happens when you hold government and nobody shows up? You won't participate anymore if you knew that.
Last, if you briefly break down this driving license not having one.
Basically, and then we're going to go on the break and I'll talk about it later. The difference between a right and a privilege. A right is something that you are born with and no one can take from you. You can waive it though. If this was your house, we have all the rights here. A privilege is something someone gives you and can take away or can regulate. They say driving is a privilege. Have you looked up the legal definition of a driver? Look it up. The legal definition of a driver is one who is employed in the use of the public highways. Do you drive a cab? No. Do you drive a truck transporting goods? Are you a driver? No. Do you have a driver's license? Yeah. You're a driver. You work for the state. And now they can regulate your right to freedom of travel because you gave up the right to freedom of travel, which is a right, for the privilege of driving. Question. If you want to be a so-called doctor, what must you get? If you want to be a registered nurse, what must you get? What profession are you engaged in the travel from point A to point B in your own vehicle? We're going to take a break.
Take a 20-minute break. Let's have a big hand for Sharif Bailey.
Peace. When we left off, we were talking about, I had mentioned the whole issue about constitutions and law being contract. And that is the basic nature of the term jurisprudence, of the science of law, is that it's contract. There's only one living law, and that's divine law. All right? And that's based in the nature of woman. It is. Fact of the matter, fact. All your municipal, all the way up, just, your higher state government organizations are all based on maternal and matriarchal principles. Now, they say patriarchal on the surface, sure, but they never, ever abandon their matriarchal foundation. Most of you here are men. I would assume most of you have children. We can prove it very simply. Every time your wife or your girl or whoever goes to the hospital with an issue about the child, does the doctor talk to you or to her? When dealing with social services, does the individual talk to the father or the mother? Regardless of whether you're married or not. Wow. They're not stupid. They're ruling based on what you gave them. They're not stupid. They know that if they don't honor mother, or if they screw with Mother Nature will screw with them. They know that. But that's divine law. Law in terms of interaction with two or more people is always a contract. Always. We got a number of people here in the entertainment business, so they understand the nature of contract. The first step in a contract is an offer has to be made. Usually in terms of contract law, you hear three main things. Offer, consideration, and acceptance. Those three things. There's some other issues that are part of contract law that they don't want you to know about. Or not so much they don't want you to know about, they don't talk about it. I mean, erase it. Shortcut. All right. And these are very important principles of contract law. And this is important that you know this, and you'll see in a minute. Mutuality, extremely important. Confidence, another extremely important issue. And
drop this by
the nature of a contract itself, it is should never be vague, specific to the letter. I'll get into that in a minute as to why. All law is based on contract. I'm going to explain in a very simple to the jurisprudence of contracts or constitutions. If this gentleman and I have a beef, I violated him in some kind of way, I punched him in the mouth, let's say. He comes to me and he says, look, you punched me in the mouth. We have to handle this. And I say, all right, how about I pay you $50? We handle it that way? He says, nah. How about I get to punch you in the mouth back? And I go, how about I give you $100? And he goes, all right. What has just happened at that point? We just made a contract. And that contract was mutually agreed upon by two competent parties involved. And it wasn't vague. I made an offer. There was consideration, which was negotiated. And then there was acceptance. Once it's accepted, that agreement became the law by which the dispute was settled. Why is it that people go to school for 7 and 8 years to learn that? That became the law by which the dispute is settled. That's pretty simple. What if we could come to no agreement? And there's no law. There's no redress of grievance. There's no mutual interface by which we can solve the issue. Am I correct? Does that make sense? Okay. That is law. That is law. That's what a constitution is. A constitution is a contract between two parties. The parties, number one, have to be positively identified. And then the offer has to be made, or the body of the contract. And then it is sealed or signed, which gives it life by the two parties. That now becomes the manner of discourse legally between the two parties. That's what a constitution is. So let's see if we can identify those in the Constitution of the United States. How many people here know the preamble to that Constitution by heart? I do. It starts, we the people of the United States. Now, stop right there. The term United States, again, legally speaking, in a legal law dictionary, does not mean the several states. Doesn't mean that. Never did. It says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect what? Union. Those are your two parties. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for who? The United States of America. What is of? Language-wise, what is of? It's a conjunction, denoting what? Ownership. Right? Ownership, the camera of this one. So we're talking two parties, United States of America. And this Constitution was established for the United States of America. That's why they never say that those Europeans wrote it. They say that they framed it. That's why. They didn't write it. They didn't write it. They framed it. They took it and adapted it. Can I prove that? I read you the first half of the letter that George Washington wrote to the Sultan of Morocco, where he says it. He says, the United States of America have thought proper to change the government and institute a new one agreeable to the Constitution. He said it. So we understand now how that Constitution is a contract, and now we have to identify the parties involved. A lot of our people are so caught into this thing where we say, oh, well, the Constitution doesn't represent black people. You're right, it doesn't. But now you have to ask the question, what's a black person? We already went over that, didn't we? Again, Noble Drew Ali said, can a man be black, Negro, colored, Indian, or West Indian? No. Man cannot be a color. So you're right. Constitution does not recognize black people. Guess what else it doesn't recognize? White people. Understand? It doesn't recognize it either. But in one section it does. The United States of America. Who are the citizens of the United States of America? Do you know?
The Moors.
No, not the United States of America, sorry. Not the United States of America. United States, United Sovereigns, yes. The Aboriginals of America. The United States of America. Or the Aboriginals in America. The United States of America are the contracted European males. Can I prove it? Sure. What happened what legislation was passed in 1920? Women's suffrage. What does that mean? That means that the drafting of this Constitution for the United States of America, which is the several European states, the European woman was not human. She was not one of the contracted citizens party to the Constitution. How did they get it? Denied their men's sex. They denied their men's sex. And they got the vote in 1920. But still, it was an amendment. It's what we call in legal language ex post facto, after the fact. Yes, sir.
But if the woman wasn't human, how could they be human? They came from the woman.
Well, that's nature's law. We know that. But again, before they can enslave you and take you outside of the constitutional fold, they had to do it to themselves. To keep my foot on your neck means that I'm enslaved too, because I got to keep my foot there. I can't go nowhere either. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now, we the people are represented by this seal. That's us. That's us. We lost that. We stepped outside of the constitutional fold, and it's spoken of in your Bible. The story of the prodigal son tells it in the plainest language. Man was the son of the king, which means he was what? What's another definition of king, or another word analogous to king? Sovereign. He was the son of the king, but he left home. He wanted to see what was out in the big wide world. Ended up feeding the pigs of his father's enemy. And the pigs ate better than him. Right? That's how the story went. The man was like, wait a minute. My father's servants eat 10 times better than me right now. If I just go back to my father as a servant, come back humble, it'll be all right. So that's what he did. His father threw a party for him, put a ring on his finger, gave him the seat back. You know. And that's the situation we're in. We strayed, as Drew Ali said. He said, through sin and disobedience, every nation has suffered slavery due to the fact that they honored not the creed and principles of their forefathers. That is why the nationality of the Moors was taken away from them in 1774. And the words Negro, black, and colored were given to the Asiatics of America, who were of Moorish descent, because they honored not the principles of their mother and father, and strayed after the gods of Europe, who they knew nothing of. Brother, when you asked the question before about how we came here from Africa to America, what do you know? What do people know about true world geography? See, again, like the sister said, man, we are woefully lacking in the proper education to take our place amongst the civilized nations of the world. Because this is common knowledge to everybody else on the planet. They know it. They already know it. We're just trying to come lately, man. All right. In the old world, quote unquote, pre-Columbian era, you know, Christopher Columbus, we did not think, or the people, the civilized people of the world did not think in terms of nation states and continents. Everything was spoken of in terms of kingdoms, empires, and dominions. There's a difference. There's a big difference. The difference is that with states and continents, you have definite physical borders, or nowadays, corporate borders. Those borders are on paper. Or kingdoms, empires, and right? Basically mean wherever the rule of that ruling body extends to. You understand what I'm saying? So if I say that where I'm sitting right now is a Mexico, and this is the ruling body for a Mexico, then we finance our own trip to the moon, and I plant that flag on the moon, that's a Mexico. Because the extent of our rule extends there. You understand? That's a basic premise of world geography that they will not teach you in school. An empire or kingdom or dominion is determined by wherever my rule extends to. So if my rule extends as in chapter 47, Noble Drew Ali's Quran, the dominions of Africa. Listen to this. Dominions. Remember, we're using the term dominions, not continents, not nation states. Dominions. The Moabites from the land of Moab received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. That's important. Think not continents, dominions. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan seeking new homes. Listen close. Their dominion and inhabitation extended from north, east, and southwest Africa, across the great Atlantic, even unto the present north, south, and Central America. Also Mexico and the Atlantic Islands, before the great earthquake which caused the great Atlantic Ocean. You understand what we're saying? The range for the rule of the dominions of a Mexico or Africa extended here. That's backed up by archaeology, history, science. You get online and look up a magazine called Ancient American. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with it. They might as well call it Moorish American. They might as well, because the whole magazine is about permanent Asiatic presence in the Americas, pre-Columbian. That's what the whole magazine is about. Look it up. AncientAmerican.com. Yes, sir.
So we were here before the so-called indigenous people.
But,
You know,
honestly,
Native America, whatever.
the fact is that you yourself are the Native American. You are the Native American. We represent the whole human bouquet. If you didn't know this sister right here or this brother right here, you would swear that they were either European or Indian or whatever. Am I right? We represent the whole human bouquet. We produce every shade. Every shade. We just fell into stupidity. All of us, keeping it real. We fell into stupidity when somebody said, oh, he's Puerto Rican. You're a Negro. You're this and you're that. You gotta be kidding me. Didn't we fall into that? How many times, I mean, this is kind of humorous. I'm going to say it anyway. How many times have we heard the terms, oh, I saw this sister, she was fly, she was half Puerto Rican and black. That's ridiculous, isn't it? When you have Puerto Ricans who are darker than this man. It don't got nothing to do with color. You know what I'm saying? Go ahead.
Well, I just want you to, if you can elaborate on who the real red men were. Can you elaborate on that for him? So you understand where they got that Native American red skin from.
I think I know where you're going.
The Whigs Party and,
I'll deal with it on two different ways.
Well, some of the pictures that I have home of the so-called Native Americans are very, very dark-skinned people. Now, they might have lightened up in the past 100 years.
Of course.
Or so. Of course. Because I've been to a couple of powwows, and I see the blonde and blue eyes, so-called natives.
But just like Hakeem has said on a number of his lectures, he's like, you have a lot of people now that's claiming that they're Native American. All they are is Europeans with long hair.
Yeah.
What does that mean? C.M. Bay said it. He said after a particular point in time, we would start, our people, our mothers would start producing champions in the areas, in every area of people activity. And that the European order of Christ and Mary would end with the European woman and her son begging us for social recognition. That's what you see when you see these Europeans flocking to Native American reservations and protesting and wearing baggy jeans and b-boying harder than you. They're begging you for social recognition. That's exactly what it is. We don't recognize it though. We're still trying to be them. So going back to the whole Native American thing and this whole red man issue. Firstly, from an anthropological point of view, the European change agents would have you think that the Americas were populated across the Bering Strait in Alaska from the north and then down the south. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or an Einstein to look at the civilizations in Native America, the ancient civilizations. You find that the oldest and most advanced were in the south. And they became more nomadic and contemporary as you went north. Oh yeah, there were people that came across the Bering Strait. There were some of Genghis Khan's people. And they were nomadic and warlike. But the people in the Central and South America and all along the Mississippi looked just like you. And we had, come on, you're talking about people that have been here, even the European will say, okay, at least 16,000, 17,000 years. You mean to tell me in 16,000 to 17,000 years they were all living in teepees? Come on, they ain't built cities? Yo, we really Negroes, yo. Yes, sir.
According to the record, in the year 1711, there was Africans, Dynasty Africans, living in America before Christopher Columbus.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Columbus himself, like the sister pointed out earlier, Columbus himself reported in his own journals that he was sailing off the northeast coast of Cuba. And he saw a mosque. His own son reported that at one point, Hakeem spoke about this in one of his lectures. He spoke about how Ferdinand Columbus wrote about how they needed some people to speak to the king of Cuba. And they had two Jews amongst them. And one spoke Arabic, and others spoke Hebrew. And so he sent them, because that's what the kings and the nobility in Cuba were speaking. They know, man. They know better than we do. They got us thinking this garbage that we were running around over there on some other landmass. And as long as they got us thinking that, we will never claim ours here. Yes, sir.
Well, someone once said, why don't they go back to Africa? So I said, this is Africa, because I thought this broke off on Africa.
Also, too, even more so than that, brother, again, the dominions. The dominions extended here. And the big secret, brother, is this. In reality, the dominions started here and extended outward. That's the big secret that lots of people pay hundreds and thousands of dollars for and go through a few humiliating things and then swear they can't tell anybody. You understand what I'm saying? That's one of the big secrets. That's one of the big secrets. You are sitting in the promised land, the New Jerusalem. This is right here. You're here. You know? All for the past, honestly, for the past, all of recorded history, which extends about 51,000 years. For the past 51,000 years, the whole world has been controlled openly and secretly from this hemisphere. Fact. Fact. Openly and secretly. Anybody ever ask themselves, how many people know about, you know, the Nazi war criminals and all the Nazi scientists and that whole thing, the Operation Paperclip? Yes. What was their fascination with coming to Argentina? What the hell is in Argentina? How many people are familiar with the Maximilians and the Habsburgs? Do some research. You'll find out that they called the land that we now call Argentina and Brazil ancient Germany. Yes, sir.
Plus, they say that the so-called European, so-called white man, had exterminated the so-called native Argentine people, and the majority of the people that was living in Argentina was from European extraction.
Well, brother,
That's one of the reasons that
I don't know if I want to say this, because I'll just put it like this, brother. A lot of us are familiar, I'm going to say it, a lot of us are familiar with the whole Yakub story about a process depigmentization of certain people. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't done over there. It wasn't done over there. Europe is a designation. In reality, the name Europe is the name of a Moabite queen. It's not a landmass over there that we call Europe over there now. It never was. They took that name once they rose to power. Europe that was pretty good stuff. That's Europe. Again, talking about true world geography, why, when you look at maps, the northern hemisphere is called, in Latin, the southern hemisphere is called, what does that mean? Latin or Oriental in Latin means what? East. Occidental means what? West. This was the designation of Europe, the bottom of the world. When Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that EU means hillsides and ROPE means the rope to bind it, that rope was the equator. We kept them at the bottom of the world. Why do we call it the bottom of the world or hell? I'll tell you why. This is our rendition, North America. Got Australia over here, got Africa, Europe, all this other stuff here, Middle East, whatever. Where's Morocco? I wanted to get to? brothers, this. Where the man was finally finished was here in the area of Argentina, but at the time it was not called Argentina, it was called Patagonia. They still call themselves that. Okay? But the males were the main purveyors of new diseases because of the experimentation. So we had to separate them. And we put them off on the high seas, and we sent them to where? The island of Albine, or Albion. What do Englishmen call themselves to this day? Sons of Albion. Fact. But we kept the women here, which is why to this day you can go to Argentina and Brazil and see these beautiful brown skin women with blonde hair. Which is why you heard the Amazon stories of whole communities of women with no men. Which is also why you had the island of Lesbos and all this other crazy stuff over here in Europe, where there was a whole lot of men and no women. We did that. We made the man, so we were responsible and civilized. So that's our fault too. We can't give him credit for the slave trade. We taught him how to do it. I'm going to tell you some things about the slavery issue. Do you know that it was a dark-skinned, kinky-haired man right here in America that started the whole slave thing in perpetuity? Meaning that you would forever be a slave and your children would be slaves forever? Did you know that it was dark-skinned, kinky-haired brothers in the South that actually spent money to preserve the institution of slavery during the Civil War? Did you know that when these Europeans started running us off our own plantations, they just came into possession of the buildings and the slaves? Did you know that right here in New York State, there's cases on the books that you can go see to this day where, do you know the real reason why this New York State was considered a big hotbed of abolitionist activity? All these so-called good-hearted Europeans trying to fight against slavery. Do you know why? They were freeing themselves. Go to the records and see it for yourself. They won't put that in the history books. But one thing we love about Europeans, they keep excellent records. Go check the records. It'll blow your mind to see how many European women were dragged into court and they had to prove that they were not Negro slaves. Oh yeah, they were called Negroes. Did you know that?
What about Moors also?
Of course.
They were dragged into court also.
Yeah, but you know but you know that we were the ones doing the enslavement? See, what goes around comes around. The real reason, karmic reason why we were enslaved is because we did it to the European first. Read Candide by Voltaire. Read Macbeth. Shakespeare. We did it to them first. So we got our just desserts. What happened to them happened to us. It's a fact. We did it to them. We sold their women on the high seas as a high-priced commodity, and it came to bite us right in the behind. That's dealt with in a lecture. Actually, I have a lecture here. The Hakim did, how the Moors were defeated. It started from within. They didn't come and beat us up with all force of arms, really. Not really. They started killing our women and children, and we kind of gave it to them. Plus, too, a lot of the cats that were coming against us were our own children. Think about it. The European woman was a high-priced commodity on the seven seas. We're selling like that, to snatch them and sell them. High price, so only our nobility could afford them. We had whole harems of them. We had children with them. We cherished those children and brought them into our courts and taught them our sciences so they qualified themselves through civilization and proper education, while we were denying our own masses that same education. So in the course of 1 or 2 generations, all of a sudden your nobility is bleached out. And you're like, what the hell happened? Think about the Boston Tea Party. As far as the identity of individuals. Actually, it's a little bit off the subject. But they kind of tell you the truth. Why in the world would you have some Europeans paint their face and put on wigs to get on a ship? Since when do so-called Indians own ships in Boston Harbor? But that's exactly what they tell you they did. They say they disguise themselves as Indians. How they do that? Put on wigs and painted their faces. Now we think they put on war paint. Right? That book I mentioned by Ray Irwin, Diplomatic Relations between the United States and the Barbary Powers, tells you why they disguised themselves and painted their faces dark just to get on a ship. Because it was dark-skinned, kinky-haired people that had them blockaded in Boston Harbor, in the Carolinas, in New Orleans. Why are they going to dress up looking like Indians to get on a ship? Wouldn't they be noticed a lot quicker? Yeah. They disguised themselves as the owners of the ships to get on the ship. And they weren't dumping no tea off from the ship. Wasn't no tea, they were looking for something. That's another issue. That's actually a Masonic issue, dealing with the whole Prince Hall individual. How many people here are Prince Hall affiliated? What? Prince Hall. Maybe you are, maybe not. Prince Hall was a brilliant man. But I'll tell you a secret. That wasn't his name. That wasn't his name. It was not his name. You do all you need. As a matter of fact, most Prince Hall researchers or scholars on the subject will tell you that that was not his real name, and they don't know. Do you know what those men were doing on that ship on Boston Harbor? They were looking for the charter for Africa Lodge 459, the first Prince Hall Lodge. That's what they were looking for. But, like I said, that wasn't that man's name. Who was he? Who was he? That's something to look into. The first prerequisites of being a Mason is that you must be firstly a man free-born and of good report. Well, a free-born man has what? You could say it. A nationality. So was Prince Hall a Negro? He definitely wasn't Prince Hall. He had a nationality, him and the 17 other brothers that petitioned for the charter. They say they got the charter from England. But you know what? An inquiry into history shows us that there was no such English nation on that island until when? The late 1700s, early 1800s. That island was ruled by Muslims.
What island?
The island now known as the British Isles. Find it for yourself.
Is that where you get the British name, war?
Also, too, where they get the name Redcoats. Redcoats. The brutish Moors. Read that book. They weren't fighting against some European British in the Revolutionary War. It's a lie. It's a lie. The Patriots will tell you that the European states never won their independence from the British or from England. They never did. It's very easy to prove. What's a charter? The definition of a charter is a document that gives a right to function. Am I right? That's what a charter is. Ask any dime store lawyer what every state constitution is based on. The Roman Catholic Magna Charta. The Great Charter of England. They never won their independence from the British. They lied to you. It was a lie. They never won their independence. Never intended to. Are they going to bite the hand that feeds them? Right? We call that Masonically clandestine. They have no charter. They're illegal. Right? They never won their independence from the British. Never. Because it was England that gave them the right to function. Okay? That's real legal history. Little simple things. CMB said it takes one word to proclaim the truth, but it takes a whole bunch of words, books, professors, institutions to cover up and hide the truth. In the very beginning of the lecture, I mentioned two events in history. March 6, 1933, and March 9, 1933. Two major things happened. The government went out of business. March 9, 1933, Constitution was suspended. There are no union of states. There are no sovereign states. There are no states. Fact. We won that one. But now we're in what we call a grace period, 60 to 70 years, where we're on an equal basis. Honorable Elijah Muhammad spoke of that grace period. He said that was time for the European to get out of the house and giving time for you to prepare to get back in the house. So you're under the gun too, just like him. He had the chance or the choice or the opportunity to re-educate you. That's what the Freedmen's Bureau was all about with Andrew Jackson. To repatriate and re-educate you so you could see or make your actual freedom. Did they do that? No. They chose to keep you blind and basically start killing you wholesale. And even better, since they knew you were stupid, all of us were stupid, they put the gun in our hands and got us to do it ourselves voluntarily. That's what they did. That's what they did. And none of the rest of the world couldn't touch us. They couldn't touch us. Because when the nations of the world get together to discuss issues of law and rights of individuals, they never consider a people who do not have a nationality. Never. Not one of you here has ever seen a real judicial court. Never. You've seen Article 1 courts, which are Admiralty Maritime, which means law of the sea, which means the captain's always right, which means there's no such thing as a constitution in that court. That's what you see, because you're not a party to it.
I heard so about the flag that we in the courtroom, like the yellow.
It's a military flag, that's a fact.
That's the flag stand or signifying that, like it's a war, the country's got war in it.
That's exactly right.
Yellow trace around the flag.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. March 9th, 1933, the War Powers Act was signed. We were in a permanent state of emergency. The Constitution was suspended. Yeah, you had war. And the War Powers Act means what? It means that the occupational forces are about to get kicked out of the house. As it says in Revelation's 12th chapter, woe be unto the peoples of the inhabitants of the earth, for the dragon has come down in great wrath because he knows his time is short. That's what that means.
So the Negro's the only one who doesn't know that he's at war.
Brother, we are the victim and the prize at the same time. We're the victim and the prize at the same time. Real quick, I'm rushing things we're going to do question and answer the last 15 minutes. Things that we all have to start with, first of all, is a foundation before we can start to take our place in civilized society. In dealing with the whole issue of nationality, the working tools of a free society is, first of all, your right national name. Number 2, a seal. Number 3, a flag. Number 4, a constitution. You must have these. These are your working tools. Without these things, you have no rights, as Judge Roger Taney said it, you have no rights to be respected by anyone. The thing is that we have these things, we just have to take them back. A lot of people see this, oh, that's the seal of the Illuminati. And I mean, come on, man. Always like Taj always, Brother Taj Tariq, throw the baby Negroes, man, always throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know? Like this thing is going to do something to him. Negroes running from it. Gotta be kidding me. You know, this whole race issue, we created it. We're responsible for that. Frankenstein monster killed his creator. We made this monster and we've been running ever since. We call it racism. Pitiful. You know what I'm saying? We have a seal. Take it back. If you don't, the principles that this seal embodies have always ruled this planet. If you don't take it back, guess who will? You ain't got no problem with it. Still want to be Negroes? You keep it another 50 years. You take those things back. Honor your mothers and your fathers. This is Old Glory. This is yours. That's yours. Take it back. It don't got nothing to do with religion. It don't got nothing to do with joining the group. Nothing to do with that, yo. People say, oh, you want me to join the Moorish Science Temple? Nah. But the fact of the matter is this. Noble Ali said, you will not get by me this time. Was he talking about joining his organization? No. What he taught was nationality and birthrights. You ain't getting out of this without declaring your true national identity. You can look in a Webster's dictionary and see it. Fact, yo. We're going to close. Actually, I'm going to close here. I'm going to take questions.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what about citizenship?
Citizenship? First and foremost, in this present society, you have different classes of citizenship. Most of us don't know that. Well, if you had your choice, what would you rather be? First class, not second class. But what are most of us? Most of us don't even know the difference. But the prerequisite to citizenship is nationality, first and foremost. When foreigners come to this country and they go through immigration and naturalization at Ellis Island, they have to declare what? Nationality. What's your nationality? Ask an Italian guy. He ain't got a problem with it. What citizen are you? I'm an American citizen. What's your nationality? Oh, I'm Italian. They got no problems. Ask one of us. Oh, what's nationality? Oh, black. No such thing. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you could, I just wanted to ask you if you could physically show them on the symbol how we are Moors with the circumstance on that symbol. No, you could have the Illuminati symbol or symbol on the back of the dollar.
You got a dollar bill on it?
Yeah.
Bring it up there.
Why Star David on the back of the dollar?
Star David?
Yeah.
That's not Star David.
This is Star David on the right side.
No.
Side of the eagle.
Remember, wordplay. The Amistad ship in the movie and also in history, they call it a slave ship. Why? Because it's advantageous for them to call it a slave ship. What was it? Warship and smuggler ship. They call it Star David because they took it from you. They don't want you to take it back. The proper term for this emblem is called hex alpha. Hex alpha. And the hex alpha is the geometric equivalent to this. The Fed, which is your national headdress. So when you see that hex alpha over the eagle, what is it telling you? It's telling you that you gave him the crown of rulership temporarily. Why do you think the eagle is looking at the seal? Do you know, and I mentioned this in my last lecture, that there is law. You talked about the whole flag issue. That's United States Code Title 4. Do you know that there's law that provides penalties for flying any flag, banner, or standard above or to the viewer's left of the United States flag?
Repeat that, please.
There is penalties for flying any flag, banner, or standard above or to the viewer's left of the United States flag. Why is that? Very simply, in Western society, we read from left to right. So whatever's on the left side takes precedence. Which seal is on the left? Which seal comes first? Now ask yourself this question. This seal was designed in the 1700s, but was kept secret for over 150 years. You didn't see it until 1928. Wow. concept and precept. This novus ordo seclorum is nothing new. You're the inventor and the inheritor of it. You want to know who the real Illuminati is? We're looking at it right now. You. Now you see why they want to have people on TV, on the, these different shows, Judeo-Christian shows, saying, oh, the Illuminati, they're the evil, and what now? That's you. And they say this is the seal of the devil, and look, what kind of people build pyramids? We're idiots, aren't we? We're straight idiots, yo. We build the pyramids, we run it, oh, it's the devil. I'm kidding you. All right? But our seal takes precedence. Why? Because it was our seal that financed their corporate endeavors. Can I prove it? George Washington says it in his own words. The encouragement which your majesty has been pleased generously to give to our commerce with your dominions. What is he saying? Thanks for the land so we can set up our business. Where did these corporations set up? On the eastern seaboard. The 13 colonies. We gave them a charter. We gave them a charter.
Can I just,
Go ahead.
I just want to show you the actual proof.
Come on.
How you doing, Chief Ali? Well, on the dollar bill, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Go ahead.
On the dollar bill, if you look at the Holy Quran Circle 7, it's a circle in the 7. Just to show you the actual proof that this is our symbol. If you turn it around, it's the circle 7.
It's the circle 7.
Noble Jali brought that to our attention with the Holy Quran Circle 7. That's the proof that this is our symbol.
What, please, thank you. What does that have, what does this symbol have to do with government? About to show you.
Shape part. Shape part.
Yeah. Oh.
What does this symbol have to do with government and the science of life? Does anyone know? What does this symbol here, the circle 7, have to do with life or the science of government? In a sense. How many people, listen, everybody listen, how many people know why there's 7 days in a week? Why there's 7 days in a week and 52 weeks in a year? Okay, what's the significance of that? 5 plus 2 equals 7. Yeah, 7 days a week. Why is it 7 and not 8 or 9 or 5? Remember what I said earlier, that government and the science, the divine science of government and law, real divine law, is based on woman. I'm about to prove it to you. The reason why there are 7 days in a week is because the real calendar for life itself is the lunar calendar. Don't believe me? Ask any farmer. Tell me we don't believe that this side don't believe in astrology. Ask any farmer. They know. They know that they have a particular window of time to plant their crops, and if they don't do it, we don't eat. And it's all based on the moon. The cycle of a woman is how many days? How many? No, the cycle of a woman. Close, no cigar. How many days? 28 days. What is how many biology students we got in here? What is the average lifespan of a single human cell? 28 days. The body does a complete overhaul of the cell every 7 days. 28 days. How many astrology buffs do we have in here? In astrology, the moon energy is responsible for the building of physical bodies. Right? Makes sense, doesn't it? The lunar calendar has 13 months, divided into 28 days apiece. Right? Now you know why. Now you know why. Because the science of government and life has always been matriarchal. Always. It's always been based on woman, because woman herself is the supreme gate of life and death. All of us come into the world and go out by way of woman. Whether it's the one on two legs, or it's this big ball that we call Earth, Mother Earth. It's all based on that. We don't eat and we don't live without mom. Yes, sir.
So European Global 2000 genocide, has more to do with the men there, right? Not with the black man. So it's a population problem, so-called.
Well, the population problem is a myth, brother. It's a myth. How many years we've been on this planet? And all of a sudden you mean tell me in the past 2,000 years we just population boom and we ain't got no more room? Don't believe it. Don't believe it. All right? Don't believe it. One of the real objectives of the whole Global 2000 eradication program is a paradigm shift in thinking. They've already calculated that most of us will not be able to make the shift. We still think that people are defined by colors. You see what I'm saying? That's what the whole elimination is really about. To make the transition a little easier. That's a part of it. That's a part of it.
So what is that defect or weakness in so-called original man that's caused him to go through this karmic mistake, so to speak? We're trying to rectify ourselves now.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad asked
He can't protect himself, so to speak.
the Honorable
From the fall that his forefathers had made, he created this Yahoo.
there was a question.
In his mind that
There was a question. I'm sorry. I keep thinking that you're done. I'm sorry. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was asked a question by his teacher. And the question was, why did God make devil? Very important question to ask most of your religious, especially Christians, and they'll short circuit. They'll short circuit you asking that question. Why did God make devil? The answer, to show and prove his power, that he could make a devil, have him rule for X 96,000 years, says, and then destroy him in one day without falling victim to the devil civilization. The fact of the matter is that when we created this experiment and we made this man, all we did was take our worst part of ourselves and put a body to it. So the real devil is who? Think about it. We say that, it's taught, in the lessons on Elijah Muhammad, the nation of Islam, they say, who is the colored man? Colored man is Yaqub's grafted, Yaqub is Caucasian white man, or Yaqub's grafted devil. Or he's the grafted devil, who's the original one?
that's something that we our nature.
The fact of the matter, exactly, brother, the fact of the matter is that it ain't the Europeans we got to worry about, man. It's our own people that look just like us. Yes, sir.
That's the hex of
Hex alpha. What does it mean?
Looks like a sardine.
Yeah, well, that's what they want to call it.
It looks like an upside down pyramid.
Say that again? The same formula or mathematical or mystical occult formula that Jesus gave his disciples when they said, how should we pray? Exactly. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as above, so below. Which means what happens up there happens here, simultaneously. If I want to measure the ceiling, I don't got to get a ladder and go up there. All I do is measure the floor. Yes, sir.
Also, that relates to the physical body in terms of chakras. There's 3 chakra points above and there's 4 below.
Exactly.
And the 4 below is the animalistic chakras of the bestiality chakras, those which we are controlled by physical, meaning, the sex organ. The higher chakras, once you reach the 7th chakra, that's why they put the G and the 7 in the middle. 7th chakra is the Christ chakra, which anyone can get to if you do meditation and reach your highest point of intelligence.
One of the reasons why, I'm going to put it up there, but one of the things in our mystery school called Masonry, one of the questions we're asked, right, is that why did we become? To learn to subdue our passions and improve ourselves. Subdue the passions. That's the down, that's the upward pointing here, subduing the lower part. To draw circles around the lower part. To circumscribe it, to keep it under control. Because that's the root that allows us to ascend back to God. That's what that is. But that's the hex alpha, and it represents your rulership. See, when they defeated us, they took little bits and pieces of our science, shot it over here, shot it over there, and built civilizations on it. They took a piece. The Greeks decided to take some of your intellectual material, built civilization. The quote-unquote Jews took your mystical and occult sciences, built a civilization. But it's yours. It's yours, and they always know it. They know you didn't know it. And as long as you didn't, they say what? Equal trade is no highway robbery. You ain't know and you gave it up freely. Yes, sir.
Well, before I was saying that they said the Moorish don't pay taxes, and they don't do a lot of things that comply with the law.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Okay. Yes.
I've heard all the information. I've learned quite a bit. I've explored some things that you rehashed.
Yes, sir.
Thing that I remember most is that one becomes insane if he does the same thing
And expects different results.
and expects a different result.
Yes, sir.
That's something I don't necessarily need to elaborate on. Like I've since for myself where I am, what that means. But the thing that I'm most intrigued about in terms of the definition of the word take, I've heard throughout this whole session about how things were taken from us that we created. I guess now, not necessarily a need, but a feeling that I would like to have before I leave. I like the feeling that was great for me.